Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your speech. My name is Naledi, I'm with Alice Feldman and Women's Foundation of Degrowing Studies. And my question is, starting off as a Minister of Parliament and the work you've been doing, how have you seen the role of education in South Africa transform and evolve to really bring about change in the society?
Well, we're still in a process of change in South Africa because it's going to take a long time to overcome the legacy that we inherited. But we have taken many important steps. So, for example, I think the biggest step that the country took was in its first year of democracy. Its very first policy announcement was 10 years of compulsory education for all children. I think that was a very important first policy step because many children had been denied access to education. The second was to fundamentally alter the curriculum that is offered in school, to change into trying to move from the rote learning and regurgitation that we had in our previous system, as well as the very enforced limitation of a very small number of subjects or literature that was available to the population because it was prescribed material that was available to school and even university learners, by the way. There was no academic freedom under apartheid. So changing the curriculum was very important into one that attempts to support young people to become critical thinkers, to be problem solvers, and to have the ability from an informed perspective to question what they receive and engage with it in a very dynamic way. I think we're not where we want to be in terms of the curriculum. Our biggest challenge is quality in South Africa. We've successfully achieved the access dimension in education. All children who should be in school are in school. The issue is what form of education they receive, the quality, and what they leave school with as critical skills. So that is still an ongoing agenda for the country. But in terms of science as well, we're trying to expand the pipeline. It's not big enough, not enough children leave school with maths and science competence at least 50% pass in maths and the sciences. So we're working hard at improving those numbers. We have a science and maths strategy implemented at schools, but the pipeline is still weak and needs to be, I think, expanded tremendously.
Yeah, what you've achieved, I think, is truly extraordinary. I think you have to be hugely proud of what you've done in Africa, in South Africa, and it's really put South Africa on the map internationally for the kind of science that it's doing. So it's actually, when I read this statement, I'm going to put it on my wall, that scientific endeavour is not purely utilitarian in its objectives. I think that's just a wonderful statement, and I wish our government would step up to that challenge as well. So much of what you said goes against so much what we have had to put up with here. And you've used astronomy in a very brilliant way to address so many challenges that society faces, not just economic ones, not cultural ones, access to education, inclusivity, all these things that we have to deal with in this country as well. And it's really a comment that it's phenomenal, and I'd like to see what you're doing, and congratulations.
Well, I'd like to copy Ireland, actually, because my headache is innovation in South Africa. I think our universities have not yet become adept at converting knowledge into commercial product. We have huge inadequacies in terms of startup companies from our universities. I remember 2 years ago, I almost had a huge party because Wits University had 2 startups. And I was thrilled, but then when I visit MIT and I see what they're doing, We just, you know. So I definitely affirm what we've said there, but I remain concerned that we've got to really up the game in terms of innovation. And I was speaking to your minister today to say that I hope we will collaborate in that area.
So just on that, in the spectrum of creativity from pure science through to innovation and spinning out companies is really important. It would be wonderful to see that. Are you seeing people who are educated and trained, are they getting jobs in the country? Are they bringing foreign direct investment coming in? Are startups, you know, like, are the seeds there for that kind of innovation? Because you've got the graduates, we're building that human capital.
Yeah. No, we are beginning to see it, especially young people, among young people. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the tech space and other industries. Young people are quite amazing in South Africa. But what worries us, and maybe we'll talk about it in the other group later, is that there's a lot of materialism, you know, a desire for wealth, and very little altruistic, I think, spirit. Young people in South Africa will fight with me if I say that, because many of them have foundations, they support young scholars and so on. But I think we do have a problem of a chase for the dollar, for money, and our largest concern from my side, I want to see more young people taking up honors, masters, and PhD, and I'd like to see them becoming academics, because we need to change the academy and who teaches within it, and it's something we're not achieving yet. Just a few weeks ago, I spoke at a seminar of the engineering and built environment, and it was about the academy. And when the dean introduced me and mentioned that I was a former academic at that very university, and that you see, academics can go very far, you know, referring to me, they guffawed, you know, in sort of hysterical laughter at the notion of being an academic. And so when I stood up, their seminar was about transformation. So I asked them, who do you expect to transform the institution, if not yourselves? Because you laughed when your dean spoke about academics. So who's going to do this transformation? You know, and suddenly, you know, they sort of paused. So we have to see more and more young people becoming full-time researchers and remaining in universities to become future academics. I think this is a big undertaking. We've begun a program with the Higher Education Department, so we've pooled our funding. It's called the Next Generation of Academics Program, NGAP, and we fund a permanent post for 3 years, and then the university must fund it from then on, and it's for young PhD graduates to become young academics and stay, hopefully, in university. So we're trying to do it that way.
And is that because of the age profile of the current?
It's the age profile, but also the need to change representativity. You have to have women, you've got to have black people.
And the South Africa chairs, research chairs.
The research chairs has attracted a lot of international academics, and South African, yes, but mainly established. It's not your emerging, because it's a senior chair. You've got to have quite a strong research record. I am looking at whether we should have a hybrid to the model, to look at whether we could then have a position held by a younger academic. But at the moment, we were really trying to expand the pool of supervisors available to particularly PhD students, and we've achieved that very well. But I think that other part needs attention.
That but something that SFI has done to some extent is do things like career development awards for early career academics to support their research and then moving up to senior research professorship. Sorry, any other questions for comments? Sheila?
I'm just very impressed with your policy on science and astronomy, obviously, in particular. But I was just wondering, when you were discussing this in government, how difficult was it to sell that policy to other colleagues, or was it difficult? And then when you discuss it with the general public, you know, how do you find that? And what arguments do you make to convince people that this is the way forward?
Well, I found with government that you have to engage. So I have a regular briefing to Cabinet about where we are, so that you continue the interest. Otherwise, you do lose traction, and people just wonder, what are you up to? It's all so obscure. So I do regular inputs on astronomy because it's so big and there's so much money going toward it. And with the public, I have public engagement. And sometimes on the aeroplane, and somebody, oh, you're that SKA woman, And I know, right, we got it. But I think we do a lot of public engagement to get young people involved, because we're really trying to have public awareness, public knowledge, because we don't want it to be a mysterious initiative that the population don't feel an attachment to.
Can I just ask a question? You mentioned about art and astronomy earlier on, and the importance of culture and society and astronomy in that particular link. And I suppose it's related to Sheila's question, is the role of the artist, how do you see the role of the artist in the development, in astronomy for development?
Well, in astronomy for development, I think we hadn't really thought about it until 2 years ago, when we developed this notion of shared skies. And that came about due to our realization that there were communities that were fairly close to the sites where we had facilities, but they were not part of the initiative at all. And we found that within at least 2 of those communities, there were very active women's cultural groups in the arts. And so the notion of shared skies came up. And it arose from another focal area we have in science, which is indigenous knowledge systems. And in talking with colleagues in Australia, which is the other site for the Square Kilometre Array, we recognize that they have an indigenous community, the Aboriginal community, and we have the indigenous community, the San. And so we asked these villages that I'm referring to, we asked them, do you ever talk about the universe? And they said, yeah, we've got this rock art and we do this weaving, and every year we have a festival of this at this harvest, and they produced. Oh, we thought, wow. And the Australian colleagues asked a similar question and similar results. So we thought, let's collate this. And we developed this exhibition called Shared Skies. And what it is we, the science, with SKA, with SALT, with other telescopes, we share the skies with other communities. So they came with their art and various imagery, and we brought the telescopes along and had the 2 in this. It's now a worldwide exhibition. It's been to different parts of the world, and it's just absolutely wonderful. It has changed the face, I think, of how astronomy is perceived by communities. It really did, I think, cut down the obscurity and made people feel a part of something that they had been aware of, actively interested in, but no one had included them in the part we are involved in. So,
Can I extend that? Do you think that's true of
I think so, yeah. Well, as I said, what we've tried to do with these centers, science centers that we've built, is bring in different generations. But we've also, with education, had a very robust literacy initiative in South Africa that has had immense impact. It's a program called Karikude, which is one of our languages called Venda, and it means let us learn. And it was just an incredible initiative. Volunteers, who were mainly young people, taught illiterate community members in church halls, in garages, in community. South Africa was different. We even had one group of street people, adults living on the street, learning in an underground car park. And every evening that group was there until they completed the program. So that literacy initiative has been very important. It impacted on 6 million adults. Government stopped it after 5 years, but we're now looking at it again, and we feel we didn't cover all those who need literacy, and we need to probably implement it for another 5 years. So we've tried to reach out, and it included numeracy, some science, and it was language in your own language. But it was, I think a really fantastic initiative for adults in our country.
Thank you, Minister, for your talk. You spoke about trying to attract young people to work in universities. Could you speak to the effectiveness of getting people into teaching? Have you seen a benefit there in schools?
Yeah. For several, under apartheid, one of the things that they had was that every person who wished to become a teacher could get a scholarship to a teacher training college. When we came into government, because of Bantu education and the very poor quality of schooling, we made it policy that you get your teaching qualification at university. And so unfortunately, I think we committed the error of, rather than improving the quality of colleges, we moved all teacher education into university. And you saw a decline in the numbers of young people taking up teaching, because not only did we make that move, we removed bursaries as well. So now teachers had to voluntarily want to enter the teaching space and be prepared to pay for themselves. So a few years ago, when I was Minister of Education, we introduced a bursary program. We reintroduced a full cost bursary for education. It's had two interesting impacts. We began by focusing on scarce skills, so science and maths and languages, where we have a problem, especially English, in numbers, and some of the African languages, the bigger ones. So we began with those areas, and it was full cost accommodation, tuition, books, etc. And we raised the points for admission to the education faculty. Well, for the first time, we suddenly had more young people wanting to be teachers than we've ever had, and the quality of teaching improved. But here is the problem. These young graduates are not always taken up in school because their whole methodology and approach is very different from what the school is used to. So we've had to have government departments in the provinces ensuring placement of every recipient of a scholarship. But at least we've closed the gap in terms of vacancies we used to have, especially in those disciplines, science, maths, languages. And I think, it's a bursary program that is working quite well. So we no longer have the large number of vacancies we used to in teaching, and we've achieved 87% qualified teachers in the school system. So, and that's really important. That would be more than a diploma.
Okay, so I think we've worked worked you hard enough without a cup of tea or coffee, so we might close the discussion, the formal part at least, and we have refreshments outside, so
nice,
we
okay.
can have refreshments and then one final engagement with Alice's students, and
Okay.
we'll let you escape. But
All right.
just
Thank you very much for
close
being
by
here.
thanking you again.